I think the question is, can number 10 focus minds on this, or is the party just entering almost like a death spiral where everything starts to be seen very negatively?
Now, the front pages are not making very happy reading for Rishi Sunak today. The Times reports that Tory pessimists feel like, and I quote here, rabbits in the headlights following a difficult week for the Prime Minister. And several other pages report a backbench plot to replace him with Leader of the House, Penny Mordaunt. Let's discuss this with Katie Balls, political editor at The Spectator. Katie, thanks for giving us your time.
Pleasure.
Quite a lot of despair in the cabinet at the moment, Katie. This idea that some of them, Stephen Swinford is reporting, some of them are feeling that Rishi Sunak, and I quote here, he never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. That's not great faith in your leader on an election year, is it?
No. And then I think you think about the past week, and it's fair to say I think the mood has darkened somewhat, because you've just had a run of bad things happening, some in number 10's control, some not. You've had Lee Anderson defect into the Reform Party. You've had the racism row over the Tory donor. That's raised questions about the number 10 operation, the fact they changed line, initially failing to say the comments were racist. And you add that to the fact that the Tories are currently polling on average about 25 points. And there is, I think, just a sense that probably hope of a Tory recovery is near dead. Nothing is impossible, but there's definitely not much hope at all around in the Tory party. And therefore, I think you can see how things could start to get a little bit mutinous for the Prime Minister.
So we've seen that the Chancellor's budget has had virtually no difference in many ways. The polls are looking even worse for the Conservatives. I saw one that had them 28 points behind, but as you say, on average is about 25 points behind. Perhaps, though, Katie, the government is looking to next week when the Rwanda bill comes back to the Commons with a whole load of amendments attached by the Lords. Perhaps, do you think that they're thinking, well, if we can get this bill through, get some planes flying to Rwanda, that might change everything around for us? I know I'm being sort of hopeful here for the government, but they've got to be clinging on to something.
Yeah, I think it's certainly one of the things they hope might move in their favour when it comes to the Rwanda plan, which can sound a bit counterintuitive. I think just in the sense the Rwanda plan so far, I think, has caused the government more problems than it has caused them anything, which has been particularly helpful to them in terms of the delays, in terms of the split in the Tory party over it. But I think from the number 10 perspective, they're hoping on two main things. One is the fact that the economy is slowly starting to improve. You have inflation potentially down to 2% in the coming months. I think they think that's when people might start to feel the effect of these things. And then also definitely if you could get some flights to Rwanda, even I think the view is if you got a couple, because expectations are so low there, it would give them a dividing line. It would raise questions to the others. I think the question is, can number 10 focus minds on this, or is the party just entering almost like a death spiral where everything starts to be seen very negatively? And I think the reason the budget has proved quite tricky is not because the budget was disastrous by any means, but it was really seen as one of the last of several set pieces back from the summer when MPs were looking ahead that could change things. It hasn't changed much, and therefore the panic is partly down to this idea there's not many levers left to pull, which does put greater importance on things like the Rwanda vote next week.
So do we think that the sort of a vague strategy might be get some flights off to Rwanda, plan in another budget in the autumn before you go to a general election where I suppose we have to assume some sort of fire sale of tax cuts and tax reliefs. We're hearing reports that maybe some people will come off having to pay any sort of council tax, for example, from the lower income families. Is that a viable plan? And do you think that a plan like that, and I know I'm asking you for a big speculation here, Katie, apologies for that, but I mean, can you overcome a 25-point deficit in the polls by pulling whatever levers you can? Or is 25 points just a little bit too far to go?
I think it was a question of what you're trying to do here. You speak to members in cabinet, and many are talking more actually about stemming losses
Mhm.
than trying to turn this round to a surprise victory. The first government in modern history to win a fifth term, but also given all the problems the Conservatives had over multiple leaders, I think many think the opportunity of winning or even a hung parliament is maybe gone. And instead, this is more about the conversations I'm having, which is how do you avoid a complete Tory wipeout? And how do you end up with a much more modest defeat? So I think some of these measures are seen as what would make it a bit closer, not as silver bullets that would suddenly mean that Keir Starmer was the one who found himself having a fight with his side about the polls drastically changing. I think if they could get to 10 points, that was always the view in No.10, that as soon as the Labour leads down to 10 points, things start to get very competitive. It's just right now it's quite hard to see them getting down to 10 points before the election campaign begins.
And Katie, just finally, I just want to pick on the couple of names that are sort of making the rounds as possible replacements should the Conservatives decide that Rishi Sunak is not the person to lead them into the next general election. And that's Penny Mordaunt, leader of the House, and also Grant Shapps. How popular are they within the Conservative Parliamentary Party?
So I don't think Grant Shapps has much of a following. I think he would more somehow emerge because everyone decided they didn't like everyone else. That
Right.
would be his best chance of coming through.
Is he the
Um,
none of the above candidate, basically? When you go for none of the
Potentially,
above, you end up with Grant Shapps.
you could potentially end up, though he still has some who criticize him, but I think that would be his best shot.
Right.
And Penny Mordaunt, I think what you're seeing is there is a sense that some of the figures, such as Kemi Badenoch, which we know this anonymous, not so anonymous group of plotters were quite keen on having as their champion. I think that some of the figures do not see any benefit in changing leader before the next election. Whereas someone like Penny Mordaunt, potentially in a more marginal seat than some of her leadership rivals, could perhaps feel that there is more of a reason to change things pre-election than after election. But I think what we're probably entering is a period where, because Rishi Sunak is struggling, lots of excited talk about various candidates, but the more they're talked about, probably the more some MPs start to say, no, I wouldn't be able to support a coronation of X person. I don't like what they say on this, and realizing that it's actually very complicated for a reason to change leader.
Katie, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. Katie Balls, their political editor at The Spectator.